Now, a story that has intrigued people at Bay Roberts for years, I think, and we've only been hearing sketches of it over the years, was the murder of Isaac Mercer. And that was during Christmas of 1860. And we've heard that Roman Catholic mummers attacked this Protestant and beat him to death and so on. Well, it's true. I did a lot of research on this, and research is still going on. There's more information showing up all the time. As a matter of fact, last week I was at a roundtable discussion at Memorial with the Department of Folklore. And it was a 3-hour discussion on the murder of Isaac Mercer alone. That was the only topic that was covered. And some very interesting information came forward. But before that came forward, my book was gone to the publisher. I couldn't include it. But most of the information that I needed to tell the story is here. I'm just going to read you a part of this. The chapter is called Death by Mummers, the Murder of Isaac Mercer. It says, despite the political and religious troubles which plagued Bay Roberts throughout the 19th century, no single event had more impact on the people than that which occurred during the Christmas season of 1860. On Friday evening, December 28th, 3 Protestant men were attacked by 6 Catholic mummers, and by the next morning, one of the victims, 20-year-old Isaac Mercer, who had been married just 15 days earlier, had died from a fractured skull. Mercer's injuries were inflicted by a blow or blows from his own hatchet. The murder sparked widespread outrage and catapulted mumming, which is an old-time term for mummering, to the top of the legal political agenda in Newfoundland. The Mercer case can more accurately be interpreted as the culmination of a well-established relationship between mumming, violence, and the law in Conception Bay. Several dozen court cases recorded in the 1800s involved the practice of mummering. Some of these were cases of assault, others dealt with mummering without a license. The murder, however, in Bay Roberts was the only time in Newfoundland's history where a mummer, the bad jammies as we called them at the time, we weren't around, but as people called them at the time, had never committed a murder before. This was the only one in Newfoundland history. The murder started a police investigation that was flawed from the beginning. The initial investigators failed to solve the case and returned to St. John's after 1 month. In a subsequent investigation, a notice of reward had to be rephrased. It was incohesive and contradictory testimony. A key witness was deemed to be intellectually delayed, and a prime suspect died in prison before his trial date. The first newspaper report of the murder appeared on New Year's Day, 1861, and it incorrectly identified the victim as Thomas Mercer. So it's just a report that showed up in the St. John's paper said Thomas Mercer, but it should have been Isaac Mercer. 3 days after that report, Governor Alexander Bannerman had informed Colonial Secretary John Kent in the House of Assembly about the murder. The investigators returned to Bay Roberts from St. John's. The Attorney General Robert Lilly of the Newfoundland Constabulary and Timothy Mitchell, the Superintendent of Police, have gone to Bay Roberts to inquire into the case of murder reported in the last issue. The investigators had not solved the crime by January 15th, almost 3 weeks later, prompting government to offer a reward. The St. John's newspaper ran the announcement hoping that a tip from the public would bring the guilty party or parties to justice. The next section here is just a copy of the proclamation. I won't read that out. But what the government did was offer a reward of £100 sterling for information leading to the arrest of the murderer or murderers. But the proclamation was flawed and had to be rephrased, as mentioned earlier, because the Colonial Secretary offered to grant a free pardon to any persons or person who may have been present at or accessory to the said murder. So he was only going to charge the person who actually committed the murder. That had to be rescinded after. If anyone in Bay Roberts knew anything about the crime, no one was willing to discuss it. The Public Ledger, which was a St. John's newspaper back in the 1860s, the January 18 editorial indicated the scope and the investigation and the extent of Mercer's injuries. Okay, I won't think that newspaper report either. That the murderer or murderers had not been found concerned the government, and the matter was raised in the House of Assembly on January 31st. Colonial Secretary John Kent informed the House that no effort was spared to discover the perpetrators of the diabolical crime, and that every possible agency was set in motion to bring the murderer to justice. One member expressed surprise that in a small community like Bay Roberts, where every person was known to his neighbor, that the perpetrators of this diabolical deed had not been discovered, and that more secret and energetic efforts were not made to discover the murderer. The government itself contends with sending around to Bay Roberts the Attorney General, the Clerk of the Peace, and the Chief of the Constabulary, and before they herald their mission throughout all parts, thus affording the opportunity to the miscreants to evade the action of the law. So what he's saying here, the people who committed this crime knew these investigators were coming, and they were hidden away by a relative of their robbers. The various newspapers received little news of the murder from the investigators themselves, but relied heavily on second-hand evidence gathered from telegraphs and letters to the editor. One such letter, written on February the 9th by Reverend Dr. Field, the Anglican Bishop of Newfoundland, printed by the Telegraph and the Public Ledger on February 15, gives further details of the incident and how the £100 reward notice had been rewarded. This is what Reverend Dr. Field wrote. Very few persons, I believe, understand the real facts. I at least was led to suppose that the death of the unfortunate Mad Mercer, though the return of the jury at the coroner's inquest was willful murder, resulted from the senseless savage sports of the parties who infest our streets at Christmas, glorying in the name and dress and actions of fools. Such, however, I have lately been informed on the best authority is by no means a correct statement. The unfortunate man, who had been married a fortnight before, was returning from his work in the woods with two young men, his brothers-in-law, late in the evening, after having taken tea at his mother-in-law's house in the way, when, at a turning of the road, they were suddenly attacked by 6 men, disguised and armed with pickets. They were all knocked down, and Mercer so cruelly beaten that he died the following morning. His skull was fractured, with other severe injuries. After this brutal violence, the 6 men ran away, leaving Mercer lying on his face, bleeding and insensible. His brothers picked him up and carried him home. On reaching his house, he said to his mother, "Oh, mother, I am killed." They put him to bed, and he never spoke after. And now, what has been done to bring the offenders to justice? A coroner's inquest was held, and the verdict returned of willful murder by parties unknown. It could hardly be but that some person or persons must have been suspected, insomuch as the parties who had gone out in the disguise of fools were known, and it was further known that there was a bad feeling among them arising out of electioneering matters. Several names of men were mentioned who had been muttering that day. 2 of these, before the inquest, went to the constable to assert their innocence. At the inquest, these men were called and examined. They acknowledged they had been out disguised, but they swore they did not know who they were with, that they were not present when Mercer was attacked, and that they did not carry sticks. These men, however, so contradicted themselves that one of the jury told them he did not believe what they were saying. As no proof could be brought against them, they were let go, and even if clearer evidence had been obtained, it would, it is feared, have been useless to have detained them, as they would have been liberated by their comrades, and probably further bloody violence would have ensued. So they were expecting a riot. A reward of £100 was then offered by the government for the conviction of the offenders, but so incorrectly worded that it was withdrawn, and a second to the same purpose issued in its stead. A few days after, the Attorney General, with the Clerk of the Peace and the Chief Constable of St. John's, went to the place, and the proceedings and results were as might be expected. Several persons were examined, and among them 6 men whose names have been freely mentioned as having been out disguised at the time of the outrage, all denied knowledge of the matter and were forthwith dismissed. But blood cries from the ground, and however much such a feeling may be deplored and deprecated, it is feared that if other means are not used to bring the offenders to justice, an opportunity will be taken by the young men in the harbour to avenge Mercer's death. And what is the feeling and conduct on the other side? The government proclamations are all torn down. The parties are known that did it, but no one stirs. Nobody would tell. Tore all the government proclamations down. 1 week after the publication of Field's letter on February 20th, and after the investigation had been called off and later reinstated, and 55 days after the murder, 3 men were apprehended for their role in Mercer's murder. Okay? 3 men apprehended in February, and a few weeks later there were 3 more. The surnames of some of these people are quite prevalent in their hours today, and they'll be surprised when you read who these people were. And like I said, I was at a round table there a while ago, and more evidence had come up. There was an autopsy done on Isaac Mercer in the first week in January, and it was done by Dr. William Fraser in their hours. And a letter appeared in the Evening Telegram in March saying that the people at their hours weren't satisfied with the results of the autopsy, and Mercer's body was actually exhumed. and it was re-examined by Dr. Lane. And we're still trying to get our hands on the coroner's report. Some of these files now are not accessible to the public until they become digitalized. And when they're digitalized, the government will give us access and we know exactly what happened. So those are some of the extras from the book. There's much more in it. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free. I can handle it. Not the questions are easy.
How long would it have taken the vehicles to come from St. John's in the 30s?
Well, this murder happened on the 28th, and I don't think they got out here until around January the 2nd. I don't even think the officials of St. John's heard about it until
I was
New Year's
thinking
Eve.
more of the fire. Sorry.
Pardon me?
I was thinking more of the fire. The fire.
Oh, I'm talking about you. Okay. Well, they were called at I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 a.m., and the trucks got here around 4:15, 4:30.
Oh.
Yeah, so
That
it
wasn't
was,
too
you know,
bad.
it was pretty fast. Yeah. It was quite common at that time to golf trucks from St. John's because here, but it was, you couldn't do anything when they got here because everything was destroyed at the time.
Yeah.
You got a motive?
Pardon me?
You got a motive?
For the fire or for the murder?
Motive? Okay, later on in the chapter is the part that I want you to read. Actually, there was a bit of a family feud going on there. The father was of one religion, the mother was of another, and it was a family feud as well. And it had been enforced that one family owed the other family money.
How long have you been writing this book?
Forever. Yeah, forever. It seems like it's probably on and off. As I say, the last 12 or 15 years. But there were times I put it down for 3 or 4 months, and picked it up again.
Right.
And then a couple of years ago, when I spoke with the people at Franklin, they were interested in the concert, and then they put the pressure on me to get it done, and I went to finish it up.
Right.
Well, as that happens, you're never going to be finished.
Right. Yeah.
You just have to establish an arbitrary cutoff point. But hopefully, if it goes to a second edition, we can include the additional information in it.
Mike, will there be a second book?
Oh, we are talking about something in the works right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Another point that I want to make about the book, anyone here from the east end of the bureaucracy, if you're not, there's Juggler's Cove, there's French, what we call French's Cove, and Mercer's Cove. Now, Iona Bulgin, the editor of this book, tells me that French's Cove, the proper name is French Cove. And throughout the book, it's referred to as French Cove. And that's according to the Canadian Gazetteer, which is the official place names of all places in Canada. So it's actually French Cove. And another thing I want to mention is that with this book, there's so many places and people named and events that it was virtually impossible to include it in the index. The index would have taken up about half the book. So if anybody's looking for a particular event or a particular name, and you do not find it in the index, you'll probably find it within the book. Okay? We couldn't get the whole index. Anything else?
What's the connection with Bay Roberts and Titanic?
The Titanic, the message to the Titanic went through the Western Union Cable Building. A copy of the message is posted on the wall at the Road Yesterday Museum down there. I think it reads something, I've got it here, it reads something like Titanic sank, feared great loss of life, time and message and all that. Okay? Thank you very much for coming.